onions.
Dun, dun, dun,
Right.
dun, dun,
What
dun,
should I call
dun,
myself?
dun,
I was going to call
dun,
myself.
dun,
I was
dun.
going to call myself Justice. Is that good?
I'll go with that.
Yeah,
Justice.
Been taken.
Justice Onion. Justice Onion.
Justice Squared, you know?
Do you want to be a
Justice
kind of
Square.
onion? Justice spring onion? Justice
Justice Shallot.
I would quite like to be a spring
pickled
onion.
onion? Justice
The top
red
one.
onion. Dispensing
Justice Red.
the good red onion justice.
Justice R Onion.
Go on.
All right. Justice R Onion.
First name's Justin.
All right. Hello. I'm Justice R Onion, and welcome to the Court of the Red Onion. We have a very serious case before me here today, and to discuss it and debate it are two very prominent lawyers. Gentlemen, would you like to introduce yourselves?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Laurie Briggs. I am a lawyer for the Red Onion, representing my client, the great white shark, the Carcharodon carcharis, the Deepa luminaris, the largest sea predatory fish of all time. Here to dispute the silly claim that it would lose a fight with, let's be honest, a salty.
Ladies and gentlemen of the House, our Honorable Justice, our Justice, I would also like to introduce myself as Laurie Briggs, and I am here defending the great saltwater crocodile from the fairly weak grip of the great white shark. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't want to bore you with Latin names for things because, let's be honest, it's the 21st century, and I think our English indicators can tell you what's what, so we don't need to throw that around. But I am looking forward to a fair, clean debate here and cannot wait to get into the swing of things. Thank you for the time.
Excellent. Okay, gentlemen, I think because of certain practicalities in the way this sort of battle between these two apex predators, which is what they are, would occur, we're going to restrict the location. So this debate is taken entirely within the structure and confines of the shallow seas off the North Australian coast, right? Which is kind of the only place you'd expect these two to really mingle with any real degree of frequency. So I think to start us off, Justice.
Query, Justice.
Yes.
Query. Does this mean that Laurie Briggs is just going to win this debate, whatever happens?
Yes, Laurie is already won, but which Laurie is the question?
Sweet. All right.
Personally, I have no idea. So Laurie, crocodile.
For the sake of this debate,
I'll
I'll be known as Lozzaman going forward.
Lozzaman. Okay, Lozzaman, why don't you talk to us today?
Objection, Your
And
Honour.
open. Oh, yes.
There is a
objection,
man
everyone
trying to
objected.
steal my identity.
This has been struck from the case. I don't care about it.
This must be added onto a future case at a later date because he's tried to do this for about 5 years. Anyway.
You really need to get better lawyers then if he keeps doing it. Maybe don't represent yourself. Okay, so Lozzaman, Mr. Crocodile, why don't you start us off?
Fantastic. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank all of you listeners. I would like to thank the court for hearing this important case in the direst of times. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to open by bringing your attention to something that really hurts me. I think sharks are, quite frankly, ladies and gentlemen, misunderstood creatures. Ultimately, they are harmless sea creatures that don't like to attack human beings. Crocodiles, on the other hand, aren't. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to draw your attention to a famous quote in order to illuminate my point further. These homies be Instagramming about shark diving holidays, but they can't even paddle with a caiman. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we need to understand exactly why that is. Sharks are unfortunately misunderstood gentle giants of the sea, whereas crocodiles are unfortunately dangerous creatures, ladies and gentlemen. I understand that Jaws is the epitome to a lot of us of the greatest monster film out there, but it ends at Jaws. Ladies and gentlemen, if you look at the sheer amount of secondary monster films starring crocodiles, from Crocodile 1 and Crocodile 2 Death Swamp, to Rogue rogue, blackwater, primeval, and Lake Placid, I think we can agree that the crocodiles have taken up a far greater role in our collective and artistic consciousness, ladies and gentlemen. No one, as I said before, no one dives with these living dinosaurs, ladies and gentlemen, bar Steve Irwin. Everyone dives with sharks at some point in their lives. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to respectfully conclude by saying saltwater crocodiles will always destroy sharks, especially in the environment suggested by Justice Ara Justice. Thank you.
May I interject quickly and just dedicate this episode to the memory of Steve Irwin, great man, R.I.P., gone too soon. Lovely. We all got much pleasure from his work. R.I.P. Steve. Okay. The artist formerly known as Laurie Briggs, not Briggs.
I take the stand. Ladies and gentlemen of the supposed jury, I would like to actually acknowledge and thank my opposite number for commending the proper behaviour and nobility of the shark. It is true that it is not a bloodlust-filled, mindless horror just trying to go around attacking people. That is correct. However, to assume that it is a gentle creature is fatally underestimating the shark's capabilities. The shark, as we all know, gets excited at the mere droplet of blood, and in any kind of incursion during this fight, the crocodile gets bitten, which it obviously will. As soon as that blood is let into the water, that acts as a stimulant to the shark, making it more aggressive and more prone to upping its aggressive behavior. Equally, in that measure, once it gets into a ripping attack, it can thrash around and completely desecrate the underbelly of the croc. Now, the shark is, we know that the shark's bite force is not as powerful as the crocodile's. It is about approximately 8,000 newtons less powerful than the crocodile's bite. It's still at 18,000 newtons, which is more than powerful enough to take off an entire crocodile paw or fatally scratch the underbelly. And it has an incredible amount of speed advantage. It's twice as fast as the crocodile, going at 56 miles per hour. With that, combined with its main attack move, which is to go in for an initial bump and then bite attack, usually from beneath, the speed of that attack in one go could completely crush the underside of the crocodile, rendering it useless. It is also twice as heavy as the crocodile. The crocodile, the crocodile averages 500 kilograms. The great white can grow up. It can be as heavy as 1,100 kilograms. That coming at you in water, with that kind of power in one blow, this fight could very well easily be done in one move. I would like to finish with the fact, and riposte to my honourable opposite number, that even though there have been many films about crocodiles, most of them have been crap. Jaws is still one of the best films of all time and holds that position as number 5 on Empire's top 100 list of all time. It's an infinitely more influential movie, and also with the noble shark, you know, if you can't make a better film than Jaws, which you won't, you might as well get about 1,000 of them wrapped up in the swirling tornado, which was more memorable in that one B movie moment than any movie about crocodiles that's been made subsequently. I think this finishes off my aggressive capabilities of the shark. I would also make as a last point that the crocodile is lazy as fuck. The crocodile, after eating a meal, actually rest on a bank for about 2 months not doing anything. I've seen it, ladies and gentlemen. I've seen it in Gambia. The shark is a workaholic. It never gets the time off. It gets a little bit of a nap, maybe 30 minutes at best, but in the constant, ever-present dangerous environment of the sea, you can't take breaks, ladies and gentlemen, and that is why the shark would be a more efficient predator in this fight.
Thank you so much for the stage once again, honorable gentlemen. It's fantastic to be here, and yeah. So if we look at the offensive capabilities of the saltwater crocodile, right? Ultimately, what I'm trying to get through here to the audience through our honorable ladies and gentlemen is that this house would quite frankly like to make saltwater crocodiles awesome again. So I think the first thing that's going to help us get there is of course bite force. I mean, understandably, the shark house has already appreciated the fact that the great white shark has a bite force that's far, far lower than the crocodile. I mean, saltwater crocodiles pack a punch at about 3,700 psi, and I think that ultimately, ladies and gentlemen, we know as a scientific community that that is the strongest bite force on this planet, ladies and gentlemen. That is comparable to a Tyrannosaurus Rex, ladies and gentlemen. And unfortunately, Jurassic Park just trumps Jaws in every way imaginable. I would also like to say that what's often ignored is the fact that crocodiles have some of the greatest natural armor in the land, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, in order for a great white to make a successful attack on a crocodile, you're going to have to get a clean shot at their stomach, ladies and gentlemen. And quite frankly, crocodiles just aren't going to give you the room to allow that to happen. Also, if we're going to explore offensive capabilities, we can't ignore the fact that salties have something known as a death roll, which is known in contemporary Gen Z circles as the dank roll, ladies and gentlemen. Unfortunately, if a crocodile's teeth can wrap themselves around your armorless flesh, unfortunately, the great white shark has no chance in that death roll. And that being said as well, if we want to talk about superpowers and navigating the land, unfortunately, great white sharks require a great amount of locomotive force in order to break the surface and jump into the air, ladies and gentlemen. We've all seen videos of saltwater crocodiles jumping. However, what most houses do not understand is the fact that you don't need locomotive force for that. They hover at the edge of the water and they jump using perfect vision, ladies and gentlemen, because they are just that certifiably badass. Ladies and gentlemen, I could go on about the offensive capabilities of crocodiles for years, ladies and gentlemen. I could talk about the group skills, the fact that they float in numbers. However, one last point that I would like to hammer home is their ancestral connection to dinosaurs. House crocodiles, salty crocodiles, have hunted dinosaurs for generations. They have roamed the banks of rivers, dragged them in there, and devoured them. Spiritually, they're connected to crocodiles, not just down to the fact that they are reptiles, but also down to the fact that they've eaten these cousins of theirs for millennia. Ladies and gentlemen, if you think that doesn't have an impact on the crocodile's spiritual identity, then unfortunately, I believe I can't even help you during these trying times. Thank you for your time, everyone, and I look forward to continuing this debate further.
All right, I'd like to thank the honourable gentleman and the other honourable gentleman for two excellent introductions to their cases and some very good points well made. You've given me a lot to consider, and the ladies and gentlemen of the imaginary jury also. I'd like to introduce a point of discussion now. So, as it stands in 2020, the saltwater crocodile is thriving across the world with hundreds of thousands of specimens, while the great white shark has vulnerable status, as indicated by several global organisations, and is protected by many governments, including the Australian government, which prohibits the hunting of them. If the great white shark is such an awesome predator, why do they need the government to hold their hand?
What I would say in response to that, my good friend, is that the great white shark has a higher profile than the saltwater crocodile. It is considered big game hunting in the way that the crocodile is not, mainly because the crocodile occurs on land and there are many other apex predators on land to choose from in terms of hunting. But in the sea, the great white is by far the most significant trophy that you could possibly obtain, and there isn't a single stupid human with a boat that could take on even one killer whale, let alone a pod of them.
I think that's some excellent points there from the honourable gentleman. Something good to consider. Do you have anything you'd like to weigh in here, Lozzaman?
Well, 100%, absolutely. I would just like to reiterate by saying that I think it's an absolute tragedy as to what's happened to the gentle giants of the sea, the great white shark. Unfortunately, they don't have the capabilities to defend themselves as much as a crocodile would have, and therefore need these limitations placed on them. However, we understand back in the 1970s, the number of saltwater crocodiles also began to decline. And unfortunately, the government of Australia had to take action in order to ensure that their numbers remain stable, and now we're thriving. We didn't require as much hand-holding because I think of naturally built badassery, but we can truly empathize with the great white shark, and we would never want their numbers to decline in the wild. So we'd just like to close on that.
Can I interject, Your Honour, of the honour of my client, which has been impugned? I would also like to add that the environment that the great white shark occupies has been a far more affected and damaged environment by human interaction than the rivers or the land where we are more accustomed to living. The fact that trawler fishing has completely decimated a lot of what makes up the food chain of the great whites environment means that it's always going to be placed at more of a risk, whereas we are more naturally adept to keeping a balance on land, even as that is proven to be a struggle in the case of mass farming and hunting on land. But as far as our impact on the sea, it's much more scattergun and it's much more destructive, meaning that whole environments an environmental collapse means a more serious consequence for an animal like the great white shark. That is not a reflection on the shark's vulnerability to anything anything else in its environment.
I think some excellent points there made by both honourable gentlemen. I thank you for
You're most welcome.
indulging me in this discussion. I now invite you to make a follow-up statement on some other capabilities and interesting things about your creature.
So with regard to versatility and other points around saltwater crocodiles, there's a few things I'd like to discuss. So the first thing is me pointing out the obvious, ladies and gentlemen, and it's the duality of land and sea, right? There is no doubt that great whites can absolutely murk most other species in the deepest of oceans. However, we cannot ignore the fact that crocodiles can survive and thrive on land. They can't hold their breaths in water as long as a great white can. But ultimately, just the fact that we can move from water to land and land to water has a massive impact. And look, I know that the debate is around the shallow seas of Australia. So ultimately, land doesn't play much of a role here. But ultimately, that can't be ignored. If we look at this in the grander scheme of things, I think ultimately it gives crocodiles a kind of power that great whites unfortunately don't have. Look, if we're going to talk about the shallow seas, the environmental hurdle which wasn't expected till the start of this debate, I would like to talk about conquering mode as a saltwater crocodile. You see, saltwater crocodiles aren't conquerors in the same way that other species, like dragons are, for instance. However, what I will say about salties is that they tend to move in herds, ladies and gentlemen. They have the most complex social relationships of any reptile species out there. And whilst it isn't always intentional, they tend to move in large groups, and they can tolerate each other in a way that great whites can't. So chances are, if there's a fight between a great white and a massive salty, even if the great white wins, which it probably won't, ultimately that bloodied, injured great white is going to get taken apart by the hordes of salties that have found themselves floating into that shallow ocean. And unfortunately, that's something that can't be ignored, ladies and gentlemen. And yeah, I think ultimately those 2 points are just insurmountable when it comes to crocodiles defeating great white sharks. So thank you so much for the floor once more, and I pass it over to my honourable opposition to counter these points.
Thank you, and I would like to thank again the honourable opposition for, apart from the fact that crocodiles have I would say, quite evidently a mastery of land that the great white doesn't understand. As this battle is taking place in the shallow seas, that doesn't matter. And as for every other point on versatility the honourable gentleman has mentioned, the great white has that and more. So I will start with the fact that the great white is a far more manoeuvrable creature than the crocodile in water. Every time that it makes a bite, it has a higher chance with its increased speed and maneuverability to move away and come in for another attack. I will also remind the honourable gentleman that while the crocodile's armour is far too tough at all levels on the top of the body for the great white to get a significant bite in, underneath the mouth, underneath the paws, underneath the belly, and underneath the tail, this is all soft material that the great white can easily thrash its way through. I'd like to remind again that it's far faster, but I would also like to remind again that, and another point that the honourable gentleman brought up, is that sharks can't breathe for longer than crocodiles underwater. They can breathe underwater. The longer this fight goes on, the more the crocodile is going to be tired from its exertions and will at some point need to go up to the surface to breathe. When that happens, the shark has a clear shot at the body underneath. So unless the first encounter and the first attack has been so terrible that the shark can't do that, and as I mentioned before, the shark has the capability, the speed and the maneuverability to move away and be pointed away from the crocodile's mouth at all moments of those crucial attacks. The longer this fight goes on, the more the shark has a chance of winning. It only gets stronger during the fight. Added to that, and to riposte the point that the Honourable Gentleman made, that the crocodiles would come to the Salties' aid during a time of protracted struggle, I'd like to then reinvestigate the topic of blood and what blood is to sharks. As we all know, it's catnip, and they can detect it up to a millionth of a particle from about 30 meters away and further. They are masters of detecting blood in the water and coming instantly. And that doesn't just mean great whites. That means bulls. That means tigers. That means oceanic white tips. That means nurses. That means a whole host of the most dangerous shallow reef sharks that you can possibly imagine would come naturally as soon as the first droplets of blood, whether shark or crocodile, are released into the water. Then that, ladies and gentlemen, cannot be ignored with. And I tell you now, they would get there a lot more fucking quickly than the crocodiles would. Also, I would like to just refresh the point about the shark's weight. I think that acts as versatility during a fight. Counter to the fact that the crocodile can't breathe, the shark can use that weight, if it gets on top of the crocodile at any point, to press it down, as it does do with certain prey, much in the same way that the crocodile's main tactic, being the sly and cowardly predator that it is in the river to grab an animal and drag it into the water to drown. This is not something that the crocodile can do in this fight. This is only a point that the crocodile can have counted against them. I would like to also leave you on the point that the shark's smell and electrical detection in the water gives it a far greater sense advantage and in this playing field of battle during the shallow seas. So it has the advantages in how to properly scope its moves out before it makes the optimum one. That is what I would like to conclude on, ladies and gentlemen. Also, I would like to riposte the fact that Jurassic Park counts as a crocodile movie. I think this is a feeble attempt by the opposite number to try and find a film as good as Jaws, which is directly related to the great white shark. Crocodiles, I'm sorry, you don't get this one.
Okay, thank you, honourable gentlemen, for making your points. I'll give the other honourable gentleman a chance for some rebuttal, and I'll introduce another point of discussion. Honourable gentleman Lozzaman, please, you have the floor.
Thank you so much for the floor once again, and thank you so much, the honourable opposition, for sharing those brilliant facts about sharks. I think one thing our house would like to clear up is the fact around a crocodile being a sly and slimy predator. I can completely appreciate why the opposing house might have such views, but would just like to reiterate that the fact that this house loves sharks, despite the fact that we see them as weaker and gentler by nature, and no doubt would lose this fight in a heartbeat, ultimately we still appreciate that the great white shark, much like the saltwater crocodile, is a creature with its roots in the dinosaur era, and like the salty, has had little reason to evolve and is a perfect killing machine. And therefore would like to reiterate that we truly respect the point of discussion made by the opposition house, which may not necessarily be echoed. I would also like to say that, unfortunately, the parameters of this fight haven't been particularly clear. If it was a sneak attack by the great white shark in shallow seas, sure, the salty would stand little chance if its underbelly was just attacked out of nowhere. However, if both parties had a clear indicator that there was an opponent of that scope in the water, I think the fight would not hinge that way, because of course the salty would be aware of something that could attack it from underneath and would therefore be paying attention to the water beneath it. And unfortunately, once the great white tries to swim up at the croc, if its jaws, which as aforementioned have the highest bite force of any known animal that is alive today, wrap around its soft skin, I think that plus a death roll would just tear off too many chunks in order for the great white to really do anything at that point. So I think that yes, if it was an unfair fight and the great white had a stealth check advantage, then absolutely, I think it would be a bit closer. But if it was a fair one-on-one fight, no chance whatsoever. Thank you.
Thank you. There's some excellent points. You've both given me a lot to think about, and as well as the imaginary jury behind me. So I'd like to introduce another point of discussion. I just want to see how you gentlemen feel about this. So from birth, the great white shark is expected to fend for itself and find its own food. There's very little mollycoddling. And this breeds a generation after generation after generation after generation of apex predators in the sea. In contrast, the saltwater crocodile is looked after by its mother and fed and protected until it can venture out on its own. How can a whole species of mummy boys be taken seriously?
Honorable Justice, thank you so much for raising this point, as this was a point I was actually going to raise myself earlier. This house strongly believes that being raised as a mummy's boy unfortunately does not hinder its position as an apex predator, but in fact strengthens it, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to take you back to a point this house made earlier around the sociability of these creatures, even though it goes against their own very reptilian programming. The fact that they are able to come together and mingle in large groups on rivers and mangroves and shallow oceans alike mean that unfortunately it gives them, fortunately, it gives them a wide territorial grip over these regions, ladies and gentlemen. If they were kind of just left to their own devices from the time they were born, they would just fumble around in the darkness. And sure, they might become apex predators like the great white, but unfortunately this leads them to a life of loneliness, ladies and gentlemen. Why have humans climbed to the top of the food chain, ladies and gentlemen? It's not primarily because of our individuality. It's about the fact that we can cooperate with each other and act in a group. And unfortunately, even though the crocodile doesn't have this to the same extent as the apex mammals, they're still able to do it enough so that they can conquer areas of riverland that are frequented by large populations of animals and human beings and cause havoc, ladies and gentlemen. Unfortunately, great white sharks just do not have this. So I would like to counter your point by saying this, in fact, gives them sociability at a young age, so it makes them stronger apex predators as they grow older. Thank you.
That's an excellent point. How would you like to respond to that, on gentleman Laurie Briggs?
I would like to counter the man who calls himself a Lozzaman with the fact that the sociability and the also, as I mentioned earlier, the nature of the crocodile's predatory tactics to hide in water and attack at things that are moving outside it, which I did refer to as a slightly cowardly. Both display psychological deficiencies in the saltwater crocodile's makeup, and also I would add that it mirrors human society to have of human existence to have society as a bedrock. But unfortunately, we do get these predatory human individuals who rise to the top of the chain, who know how to manipulate that society. I could go on and mention tons of examples, including Joseph Stalin and the like. The great white shark is more similar to these kind of individuals, unfortunately, but for the purposes of this fight, makes them far more intimidating a force. It also and as I was referring to before, sharks may not be social. Well, great white sharks may not constantly be social and be hanging around in large groups, but my right honourable gentleman forgets that actually sharks are an incredibly social bunch of animals. If you check out any of the hammerheads movements around the Galapagos, you will find that they gather in huge clouds together. But I would say for the great white, this is an advantage.
Action, Your Honour.
No, I'm still talking. The great white has an advantage because individually it is a complete predator which can more than stand up for itself, but yet, much along with its great white brethren, they are all drawn together by the blood released by the crocodile in the water or any animal that occurs, and then they are there as a united pack of predators, which is far more frightening than a bunch of mummied salties, let's be honest.
The honourable gentleman Lozzaman may make a quick point in regards to what you just heard, and then we should move the discussion on.
A very quick objection, Your Honour. I would just like to point out the fact that the Honourable Opposition mentioned hammerhead sharks. Whilst we completely understand this House would also like to reiterate that we could have spoken about Nile crocodiles, for instance, and their alliance with certain birds in Africa. We could have spoken about caimans and the benefits that brings. Unfortunately, we have stuck to saltwater crocodiles for the duration of this debate, and would like to humbly request that the opposition does so, if they see it in their hearts too.
Okay, that's sassy and noted, and yes, please.
I
Would
would
you
like
to
to
carry our
interject by
discussion? Yeah, by all means.
I invoke the example of the hammerheads as an example for all sharks, while always in mind returning to the fact that the great white is an individual monster that can unite with other sharks in the moment of a kill, which is what makes it different to a lot of sharks, which makes it a far more unique and imposing an individual force.
Okay, very noted, excellent point. So the Court of the Red Onion today has heard some very interesting arguments from both sides. I'd now like to take this discussion into a particularly unorthodox direction, as many of our fans in the imaginary jury will be familiar with. Honourable Gentle Lozzaman, would you like to start us off and talk about the benefits of keeping saltwater crocodiles as pets?
Thank you so much for that final point, Honorable Justice R. Justice. And look, there's a variety of facets to explore when thinking about crocodiles as pets, right? I think the first point for the entire house to appreciate is that these are two majestic creatures, and none of them should ever be kept as pets unless by specific masters that have spent their entire lives training for this. I would like to bring your attention, ladies and gentlemen, to Cheeto and Poco. Cheeto and Poco was an Argentinian man and a crocodile who, after many years of him feeding it and tending to its wounds and so on, formed a relationship where he could swim with it in the rivers of Argentina and eventually have tourists come on and have audiences and so on. This is one of the few cases where a human being has formed a powerful bond with a crocodile, but unfortunately, they're not too common, ladies and gentlemen, so it takes some great mastery of the self. However, compare this to a great white shark, which has never lived in captivity. And unfortunately, I think that just proves the point that if we're looking at this in terms of pets, crocodiles and salties just do trump great whites by that much. If you'd like to add further points to that, look at nest regulation. We know for a fact that the temperature of nests and the temperature that eggs are kept at determines whether salties are going to be male or female. And I think for anyone that's looking to form a bond with these animals and learn to breed them, that having that kind of a control is crucial, ladies and gentlemen. And look, like ultimately, I would just like to reiterate as well that salt waters have the versatility of living on land, living in water. They can live in salt water or non-salinated water. And ultimately, this kind of versatility as a pet allows you, if you have the right inner masteries, ladies and gentlemen, to keep it as your pet and companion wherever you would like that to be. Perhaps not in the Sahara Desert, but ultimately it gives you way more flexibility than a great white would. So I would like to end by saying, yes, it's not ideal to keep these majestic beasts as pets, but ultimately they still trump the great white. Thank you for listening.
Excellent point. Honourable Gentleman Laurie Briggs, would you like to continue this discussion?
Ladies and gentlemen of the supposed jury, my opposite number has declared that the saltwater crocodile is a more ideal partner for pet living. And he is right, because as we know, you can't keep a shark in captivity. It just can't be done. But that automatically makes it a more interesting beast of a machine than the crocodile will be. And I would also like to make the point, my honourable, everybody who is listening, for the whole world, why in your right mind, if you could have any apex land predator as a pet, would you pick a saltwater crocodile? As I've discussed before.
Objection, Your Honor.
No,
we'll hear the gentleman out.
You could. They're lazy, as I discussed earlier. They have the smell of rotting flesh that comes out of their mouths, which if you need to keep brushing, they will not do that for themselves. They're too lazy in order to do that. You could have any one of a grizzly bear, a tiger, you could have a walrus, for God's sake. You could have any number of a large apex land animal, a polar bear, which would be far better company than the saltwater crocodile. The hypothetical situation that you could have a great white shark as a pet does not exist, ladies and gentlemen. It is so rare and unique, you can't have that. But if you could, what animal would you rather have as a pet in the sea than a great white shark? Perhaps at a push, a killer whale, and that is it. A dolphin, maybe, but a dolphin will not protect you in any guaranteed situation. If you have the great white shark as a pet, you have access to, by far, the best and biggest biggest friend that you could possibly have in the aquatic environment. I would like to add to the point that no good Bond villain is complete without one. I would also like to add to the fact that if you were ever trying to settle down to a nice island somewhere, if you ever wanted to you live out your dream, make millions of money, what would you like to have surrounding the island in the Caribbean, swimming around it? You'd want a great white shark. It's far more iconic, it looks better, it's more streamlined, and you have that added advantage that nobody else has got one. Also, I would like to leave as a final point that they, unlike the crocodile, which is very insensitive and takes your home for granted, and as I said, smells earlier. Also, you will never have an issue with the great white shark that will ever take food inside the house that it's just killed.
Okay, it's fantastic. Yes, I'll allow the honourable gentleman Lozzaman to make some rebuttal as he feels there was some slander there, I believe.
Firstly, once again, I would like to thank the honorable opposition for all points made and for enlightening us on some of the true natures of the great white shark. However, House, I would also like to say that ultimately, this House is strongly confused as to why crocodiles were being judged alongside other land animals like tigers and polar bears, ladies and gentlemen. Much like the hammerhead shark statement made earlier, this has been another instance of today, unfortunately,
Objection.
of the court of the red onion being defaced by diversions and tangents to take home a moot point, ladies and gentlemen. And this really hurts the House in an age of fair debate. Certain other points made as well, ladies and gentlemen, such as smells and cleaning teeth. Crocodiles are notoriously clean creatures, ladies and gentlemen. Even in Africa, certain crocodiles have special relationships with certain birds, which you're taught from the age of 6. Clean the teeth of these crocodile, ladies and gentlemen. And what's wrong with a little basking, ladies and gentlemen? In today's high-paced, technologically fueled world of corporate capitalism, isn't it great to have a pet that you can bask with in the sun and reflect on the truest, most important questions of life in the universe? Reflect with these ancient beasts that have touched necks with dinosaurs, ladies and gentlemen. Therefore, yes, this House is hurt by some of the points made fairly incorrectly by the opposing House. However, I would just like to rest my case there. Thank you.
I'd like to make the objection.
One quick point, and then we'll introduce a new discussion.
I'd like to make the objection that the comparison of a crocodile to other preferable land animals is not a moot point, as the discussion is as much between would you like to have a purely aquatic-based pet to a land-based pet, as there is an unfair advantage in terms of interaction that you can have with each pet. So you have to take that whole bracket into consideration when you consider choosing land animals, that you could have more fun with interacting with a different animal. I would like to say, and then in terms of sea, there is not a huge amount of possibility, but the great white shark would be in the top 2.
I have a question there, but I kind of want to move on, but you piqued my interest. What else would be in the top 2?
The top 2 would have to be the number 1 preferable pet to have based in the sea near your fantasy tropical island house, whatever, would be a killer whale. Because a killer whale has consciousness. It is basically an apex dolphin. It's the boss of the sea. There is absolutely nothing in the sea which can reckon with it, but also it has the intelligence to play games with you, which admittedly the shark would not.
Okay, no, that's an excellent point. The killer whale would be number 1, but the great white shark may very well be number 2.
Yeah.
Okay, so introduce a final point of discussion before we hear very brief closing statements from the 2 of you, and then I'll announce the jury will tell me who they think the winner is, and I will announce that. But I think we can all agree, and this has been touched on by a right honourable gentleman, Laurie Briggs, previously. I think we can all agree that one of the major accomplishments of 21st century cinema is the film Sharknado. It did a lot to promote sharks not only as a fearsome predator, but as a cunning one able to use the weather to its advantage. The propaganda of Hollywood has not benefited the crocodile in quite the same way. Discuss.
Honourable Lozzaman, that basically is a question as to you as to why your client is not as recognizable or not as wanted to be consumed by the general public.
Ladies and gentlemen, quite frankly, I think this question comes down to this comes down to a number of factors, right? I think Sharknado is quite frankly a very interesting concept because Sharknado is thought of as a joke horror film, much like the great white shark in this fight. Ladies and gentlemen, when it comes to
That was
the
desperate.
films of
Objection for
crocodiles, when it comes to the films of crocodiles, ladies and gentlemen, as aforementioned, Crocodiles 1 and 2, Death Swamp,
There are none that
Primeval,
are good.
Lake Placid, etc. Perhaps, sure. In terms, look, the opposing house mentioned Empire and mentioned Jaws being number 5 on Empire's list. Fortunately, this house likes to come up with opinions and lists of ourselves, so we would quite frankly like to ignore that point made. But ultimately,
Objection, Your Honor.
whilst Jaws is
Out of the three of us,
undoubtedly,
objection.
once Jaws, ladies and gentlemen, is undoubtedly considered one of the most cinematic masterpieces out there.
It's better than Lake Placid.
If you look at the sheer amount of crocodile films that are nipping at its tails, at genuine horror films, which scare children and audiences for generations to come, I think it's incomparable. I think we understand at this point that Jaws simply got lucky due to the magical fingers of Mr. Steven Spielberg, ladies and gentlemen. It had very little to do with the shark itself. Therefore, I would like you to look at the list, the sheer magnitude of crocodile films, which are close in stature to Jaws, and look at Jaws as simply as an anomaly. And I would like to rest my case.
Okay, I hear there are some objections from the corner of the honourable gentleman, Mr. Laurie Briggs. And I'd like to hear some of these objections.
Mr. Spielberg had at his disposal a wand of character creativity in terms of a suspenseful character. The reason why you haven't seen a single good crocodile film is because they're too blasé. They have no subtlety. They crash in and crash out of situations. You can see them coming a mile off. You can see them coming on land, and you can see them coming in the water. The shark, the reason for its suspense and majesty is because you can't see it. That's its method of attack. It comes from below, and it builds up suspense, allowing you to add strings over the top, which make it even scarier. The crocodile can never have something as subtle or well worked artistically. Because
ladies and gentlemen, I would like to make a. May I make a quick point, Your Honor?
You may. Yes, you may. Just a quick.
I would just like. I am going to counter your point with an example. Look at the Australian thriller horror film Blackwater, based on true events. Sure, crocodiles might not have the depth of the deep seas to hide in, but ultimately salties prefer environments that they can hide in. The water is murky and dense. The mangroves and the way the water moves and the way the tide operates ensures that the environment doesn't remain still. And therefore, yes, it may not be able to dive as deeply as a great white does. However, that doesn't mean that it does not go unseen. Salties have the ability of blending in with their foliage, ladies and gentlemen. They hide, they sneak, they attack, and therefore this gives them way more versatility, and in this house's opinion, makes them far more terrifying villains than great whites ever could in film, just down to this very versatility.
Of course they can hide, but the
second a human being leaves the great seas, the nightmare is over, ladies and gentlemen. Whereas with a crocodile, you could find it in your bathroom, ladies and gentlemen. The fear never goes away.
Objection, my right honourable gentleman. Just because they are capable
I'll hear you out.
In a bush, that actually means that you have a far greater chance of escaping from them. You wouldn't escape from a shark in the sea because you have absolutely nowhere to go. You're far slower moving. So the idea of a shark attacking you in the middle of the open ocean is more scary because you are more vulnerable, and therefore a kill is more effective. Also, I would like to say that the honourable gentleman uses a great example of a point by raising the scene from Blackwater. But has that one scene had as much impact as the girl at the beginning of Jaws, as we discussed last week on our top 10 greatest movie moments, and was affirmed by the Right Honourable General at that moment as a terrifying scene? He remembered that. He didn't remember a single scene about crocodiles then, and so he can't come up now and say there is a collection of movie moments that is able to trump it.
I think you both give me and the jury quite a lot to think about there. I mean, some excellent points have been made all around. You had, for the most part, some quite civil discussion. There was a bit of some gesturing on camera, which thankfully the audience at home won't see.
Only to my opposite numbers, Clive.
Objection. I can object, even though as a justice. Plenty to think about. I'm going to confer with the jury now, the imaginary jury, but I'd invite you both now to make a very short summarizing statement why you think your animal is so great. Try and keep this brief if possible.
Ladies and gentlemen of the House, firstly, I would like to thank all of you for listening in on this grand debate at the Court of the Red Onion today. In these trying times, it only makes sense that we can come together as one united family and discuss the issues that matter most to us. So I thank you. I thank you, my most honorable opposition, for raising some perfectly average points. And it truly made this House sit back and think about our own perspectives on the matter. I would just like to reiterate that, unfortunately, the great white shark simply does not have the grand spirit of the Cretaceous, which runs through the cold-blooded veins of the crocodile in quite the same way, Honorable House. The bite force, the armor, the dank roll, and all the other little bits that make the crocodile, the saltwater crocodile, the prime jumping killer, unfortunately completely outranks the great white shark any day of the week. We've spoken about its versatility. We've spoken about how they'd make better pets. And unfortunately, we have social groups, the benefits of the land and sea, and quite frankly, our stats are just far stronger. Thank you so much for your time, ladies and gentlemen, and I hope to see you soon.
The Honourable Gentleman Laurie Briggs, would you like to make your closing statement?
Ladies and gentlemen, I am very thankful that you have tuned in to this most important first debate of the Court of the Red Onion. I know something about spirit. I am interested to hear the opposing gentleman's speech about the spirit of the Cretaceous. I would like to invoke another area. I want everybody, if they can, to imagine the world 3 million years ago. Far ahead of the dinosaurs, the Pliocene era, in fact. Just before the Ice Age. This was the era that the most feared predator in history came into existence. It was a shark, and its name was Megalodon. 3 million years later, it would be distilled into the great white shark, the magnificent, noble, sleek killing machine, the speed, the power, the maneuverability, the fact that it is a total master of its domain, and its incessant, its ramping up of aggression and power as of lust for blood is the kind of might and the kind of courage that the crocodile just simply does not have an answer for, being a ambush, hiding in reeds, hiding in murky brown water fighter. It is just, it's a whitewash, ladies and gentlemen. Quite literally, a great whitewash.
Thank you very much. Excellent discussion. I see one of the members of the jury is approaching me now. Just give me a second to confirm. Okay, excellent. Right, I've conferred with the jury. The jury would like to make one thing clear before the winner is announced. The jury would like to make it obvious to both of the gentlemen that it was a very high quality debate with some excellent points made on both sides, and it was a tough decision. There was one vote in it that swung it. It was very close, like neck and neck all the way through. I think the pointing out that the crocodile was quite blasé was a stroke of genius. Not many could have predicted that. Perhaps someone like Paul McCartney might have thought that in his heyday, but certainly not anymore. So the honourable gentlemen before me, I would like you to know and understand that mostly, so what the jury told me, I'll cut the bullshit. What the jury told me, right, is they feel like they would have. They think the great white shark is scarier, but they have more of a chance against it, you know? And this is very clear, and we have a very select jury, mainly because it's 15 copies of me. But we don't go anywhere without our 44 magnums, and we just feel like that's going to do more against the shark than it is against the crocodile. You know? And obviously, I'm always carrying a full load. So what I will say is, I think for this fight between the two predators, which is really what we're discussing, I believe the great white shark has the advantage, but I believe the crocodile is the more fearsome predator. So I think the shark would defeat the crocodile, but the crocodile would defeat me and all the rest of the imaginary members of the jury. So I would like to thank you all for a very excellent discussion. The Court of the Red Onion was blessed and enlightened greatly and definitely enriched. by the debate we just had before us. We now have time, very as brief as you want, for our Scumion of the week, and I believe it's the right honourable gentleman, Laurie Briggs.
Interjection, Your Honour. I would just like to dedicate this victory of my client to all Carcharodon Carchari out there, proudly swimming, fight the extinction. You know that the Court of the Red Onion has found you vindicated of your wonderful reputation, and I don't want to make a meal of it, as they say. I don't want to, desecrate a great carnival's triumph. So I will just leave it there and wait for the Scumion segment.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would also like to thank the entire court for this wonderful day and this wonderful listening. And I would quite frankly like to say it baffles me as to how the opposition house is seeing this kind of piecemeal gift that's been passed to them as a sort of consolation prize is being seen as a victory in the grander scheme of things. It baffles me, but ultimately this explains to the house why President Trump was elected in the first place. Ladies and gentlemen. So I would like to thank you once again for your time, and I look forward to hearing the Scumion of the week.
Yeah. I also would like to, I think at some point, maybe in season 2, but this debate will eventually come up again. I do feel like my opposite number is slightly dissatisfied by the outcome. And he has also talked at length about prehistory, his love of dinosaurs, and how that gives the crocodile a slightly grandiose image. I think inevitably the debate of Mosasaurus versus Megalodon will rear its head. We come now, ladies and gentlemen, to a segment in the Red Onion show that we like to call Scumions, or if you prefer, the Scumion of the week. This is whoever, whether it's a company or an individual, a group, who has inconvenienced you on a direct or indirect way in the last week. My Scumion of the week was a guy that, as I was walking back from shopping, taking great care to socially distance 2 meters at all time, a complete arsewipe came up behind me on roller skates within 0.5 meters of me, didn't acknowledge the fact that he rushed past me at all, and I shouted after him. His headphones were in, and then he started doing tricks further down the street to the attention of nobody.
No, he started doing tricks.
Controversial.
Wow, I didn't know about the tricks.
Whoever you are, roller skates haven't been a thing. I think the last time I remember roller skates being in visual mass media was Adam Sandler teaching kids how to trip them up in Big Daddy. So there you go, mate.
Yeah. Maybe he was one of those kids.
Maybe. Well, he could do with tripping up.
Absolutely. I think my Scumion is more of a concept than it is one particular person. But I would specifically like to point out that the Church of Elon Musk is my Scumion of the week and should quite possibly be the Scumion of the decade. Enough said.
Yeah, we don't really need to say much more about that. I mean, his plan to close his plant in California just because they're not allowing him to send his workers back because it's not safe. And he's saying, well, I'm going to move out of state. Grow up, mate.
I would like to take that even a step further and go to the Church of Elon Musk, and all his pseudo intelligence.
Yeah. Everyone around him who thinks he's a genius. I mean, right. No.
By extension, I guess he
has some good ideas.
I guess Jordan Peterson is a perpetual Scumion of the week, but I mean, there are plenty of people who.
It's better if we just don't mention Jordan Peterson because otherwise we'll never stop mentioning it.
Exactly. So yes. Those are 2 very good examples of Scumions of the week. The man who was roller skating right next to me, not giving a fuck about coronavirus social distancing, and the pretentious Church of Elon Musk supporters, yes.
I mean, in many ways, 2 of the biggest evils that are facing our planet at the moment.
Currently.
Roller skaters and the Church of Elon.
Yes, fantastic. So this is the Court of the Red Onion signing out. Stay safe, stay sane. Job bless.
Stay dank, ladies and gentlemen.
Oh, don't forget to eat your veggies as well.
Just stay your normal voice, Ralph. Okay, but so many identities to me.
The Red Onion, an effervescent look at a deflated world, was recorded by Laurie Briggs, Ajay Gnanam and Eddie Landon, and is a silly enterprise you've wasted an hour of your lives listening to. Don't be disappointed. You can waste it all over again next Saturday when we discuss a fresh new topic.